It's time to put the backing on these vintage postcards that we've been working on. And I'm going to talk to you about the type of backing that I use. This product is available in my online store, martysquiltingcreations.com, and I'll have a link for you available. This is how you will receive it. It will come in an envelope. These are hand cut by myself for you. There's a set of 5. This is provided on a Robert Kaufman muslin, so it's 100% cotton. You can write on these. I use archival inks. My favorite, of course, go-to that most of us know as quilters, is the Micron pen. And then I have also used just a basic ballpoint. You want to use a type of marking tool that will be permanent and that will not bleed, because if it's like a felt tip, if it puts a lot of ink down at once, it will bleed into the fabric just like it would any fabric. But again, these are available on my online store. There's a set of 5, and I also have a variety set that has 5 different vintage postcard backing designs. This is what we're going to be working with today. I'm going to go ahead and take one because I want to demonstrate with you something that we talked about earlier in our embellishment section of this tutorial. And I'm going to put the cards aside as well because I do not want to possibly get any ink on them, and that is stamping. And I have these 2 examples. We're working on 3 vintage cards, so I have the 2 available, but I wanted to show you how not only could you use the stamping method on the front as an embellishment of your vintage card, but you could also add wonderful stamping motifs and designs on the back of your cards, especially if you're using fabric or if you're using any type of paper method also as well. But this is what it looks like on one of my backing fabrics, and I went ahead and used the Carnation Red archival ink and just put the simple "'Tis the Season" stamp on it. So let me show you how that's done. I'm going to go ahead and put my postcard and kind of square it off as best I can. I do recommend using a surface that you will not be upset if you accidentally drop your archival ink or touch the ink to anything. I would hate to have it on a fabric surface or anywhere near your cards, your postcards that you're working with. So I like to have a dedicated surface for any type of work where I'm going to use ink or glue, just so that you know that I do switch out my surfaces. So I had talked to you earlier how I like these smaller ink pads, and the reason I like that, you need, of course, I don't want to get ink everywhere, but because they're small, I can control the application of the ink. And so I'm going to use, instead of me pressing the stamp onto the pad like most of us are used to, I'm going to take the ink pad and I am going to press it onto the stamp. And that way I can control the amount of ink. I can make sure that I am inking everything. And then what I like to do is go ahead and cap it off right away. And there we go. All right, nice and neat and tidy. All right, so I'm going to make sure I have this squared off. I've already made sure that my stamp is aligned where I want it. And I'm going to bring it in, and I'm going to carefully decide where I'm going to put this stamp. And I'm going to go straight down with it, and I'm not going to rock it. Straight down, I'm going to press, and I'm going to hold for about 10 seconds because I need that ink to absorb into the fibers. If you rock it back and forth, you're going to have a more blurred effect and possibly more bleeding than you would like. And then when you're done, you just lift straight up. And there you have it. And that is how the process of inking happens. I'll let that dry before I place it anywhere else. On the next step, I have my iron heating, and I'm going to show you one of the methods that I use in applying the backing. There are several methods that you can use to apply backing to a postcard, a fabric postcard. With this quilted postcard, there are a couple of things that you need to consider. Most of the time, I like to use my handy dandy glue stick, and I apply that, and it takes, there are several steps in that. My most favorite way to apply the backing is using heat and bond. I like the light, and for many purposes, I have this printable type available for me, and so I just grab usually what I have on hand. There's also a roll available in this product that you can get. I like everything flat, and I don't want to deal with curls and things like that, so I usually go with the prepackaged flat sheets that you get to put in your printer. With that being said, what you're going to need is, of course, for this tutorial, is some of my backing fabric, which I have these two ready. The third is still drying from the stamping we did, so I'm going to hold off on using that till I know that it's dry. You're going to need your prepared sheets of the Heat and Bond Light, and these are cut to 4 3/4 and by 6 3/4, and that's because the card is going to be 5 inches by 7 inches. I don't want the inside, the card stock, to come all the way to the edge of the backing fabric, because then I'm going to be punching holes into the cardstock, which I originally did in the beginning. It works fine, but I find that by trimming off just a 1/4 inch on either side and giving that dimension of 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, I get more of a bite into the fabric and the quilt, and I don't have to worry about punching holes into the cardstock. All right, so I have cardstock available, so you're going to need the adhesive, whichever method that you want to use, but for this tutorial, I'm using this Heat and Bond Light that I've cut. I also have the same size, 4 3/4 by 6 3/4 cardstock that I've cut. And the next part of this is going to be applying this product, the Heat and Bond, to the actual card and backing so that we can then apply it to our postcard. So let me get set up and move this out of the way so that I have plenty of room to iron. All right. I have my vintage postcard fabric with the pretty side down on top of my protective applique lining. And the first thing that I'm going to do here is I've aligned it to where it's just about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. You can eyeball it. You don't need to get a ruler out. This is going to be the space where my satin stitch is going to hit, okay? And so the next thing is to follow the manufacturer's instructions, and we're going to carefully press this down paper side up because we want the glue on the bottom for about 5 to 6 seconds. And you're going to notice it curls, and that's because the glue's melted and it's cooling down. And what I like to do really quick is lay my template tool back down on it and hold it while it cools. I can even grab my weight because I want to get my strength training in and just let it set there for a moment as that glue cools down and adheres to the fibers. Once it's cool, then we can pull the backing off and place it on the the back of the postcard. All right, the next step in this process is going to adhere the fabric to the cardstock. So I need to carefully remove the paper backing. And I'm going to align the cardstock as best I can into the same area as the glue. And this is where this product comes in handy. I do not want to lay my iron on top of that in case I didn't line that up. I don't want to get glue on the sole plate of my iron. So I'm going to lay that across. And this product comes, it's actually a larger sheet. I have cut it to my needs. Again, glue side down on the fabric. And we're adhering the cardstock to the fabric. All right. I'm going to move that over. And again, I'm going to put my acrylic template on there and weigh it down to keep it from curling. And I'm going to move on to the next one and get that done real quick. Give it a press. That should do it. And I'm just going to grab another ruler, another weight, and we'll wait for those to cool off so that we can move on to the next step. All right, so the backings have cooled, and the next thing we want to do is probably tidy up any frayed edges on our postcards. And you may have to do this again before you put the satin stitch or whatever binding you decide to do. You can actually do regular quilt binding on these. However, with the cardstock in the middle, it's going to make it rather stiff. So you'll need to practice and decide which method will work for you, or maybe instead of using cardstock, use a stiffer interfacing on the back, and that will give you the flexibility you need so that you can join your ends together if you're doing a French seam. This next step is also going to require going to the back of your quilt piece if you've done any embroidery and clipping off any ends that might be a little bulky. We're going to glue the rest of everything down in just a minute, but we want to make sure this is tidy. And something about me, especially since I have a service dog and other animals and cats, I keep a roller with me at all times to keep my surfaces and the projects clean and tidy. So that's always a good idea to have on hand. And so the next step is using, again, my glue stick. The reason why I'm using glue instead of applying another layer of heat and bond is because the front of this postcard may have embellishments that may cause it to be a little bulky, and I don't want to be trying to iron that on and going through all those layers. And I've just found through experience that it's just easier to glue these two together with the glue stick and then do the satin stitch. So I'm going to open up my glue stick and I'm going to generously apply and hit those areas where you have the embroidery and get everything to lay down. And again, especially around the edges, try to generously apply your glue. And I don't know how we get floaties in the air from the fan, but every once in a while a stray hair or thread will show up while you're gluing. And so I keep my tweezers handy. And then you're going to line up the edges of your postcard backing. Give it a good press. Again, grab a ruler or a template. Put something that has weight on top of it. Like I said, I just use my weights. And you're going to let it set there for at least 20 minutes. Within 15-20 minutes, it should be dry. And this will be ready for me to start adding the satin stitch edge on it and finish the embellishments on the front of this particular postcard. Let me apply the backing to this postcard right here, and when I come back, I'll show you what it looks like with the satin stitch.